How did you come to focus on and champion not only age-inclusive branding, but encouraging companies to build brands with longevity, that the brands can grow with their customers as they age?
I am of a certain age, so I am the target market. But one day I saw a consumer cellular commercial. I don't know if you're familiar with consumer
Yes.
cellular.
Yep.
And they target an over 55 demographic. And they do a wonderful job in what they're attempting to do. But when I saw that commercial, I realized that's going to be me in 2 years. And I don't look like that. I don't feel like that. That doesn't resonate with me. And they're lauded for doing a good job in focusing on a specific target market. But I realized that even though I was in that same age range,
Hmm.
potentially, a few years down the line, like that is not how I live. I didn't see me. So then
Okay.
I thought, like, what does this mean? What does this mean in terms of how I see myself? Do I not see myself as aging, or does over 50 mean so many different things to so many people? And it just didn't resonate. And it made me step back and try to think about, well, what's going on here? And
Hmm.
I looked more into the topic and realized, well, we don't live a three-stage life anymore. We
Yeah.
live a very broad patina of jobs and experiences. And so, really speaking to a specific demographic is harder than ever.
Welcome to the Turbo Branding Show, where we help you ignite your growth by leveraging your brand to grow faster, easier, and more successfully. I'm your host, Sue Kirshner, and today I'm welcoming Karen Attyah to the show. So let's delve into today's episode and turbocharge your brand. First, thank you so much for being here, Karen.
Thank you. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited too because I'm really excited to delve into your passion of helping brands become more age inclusive, to create meaningful connections with older adults, especially because, as I learned from you, people over 50 will control 70% of all disposable income by 2030. So that's a
Yes.
pretty big, powerful market. So before we jump into that, though, let me tell our listeners a little bit more about you and why you're the ideal guest to talk about age inclusive branding with us today. So, Karen is the founder of Intransit, which bridges generational gaps with insight-driven strategy, helping brands ditch outdated age-based targeting in favor of inclusive, life stage-focused storytelling. And with a unique blend of human insights, cultural foresight, and brand repositioning expertise, she empowers organizations to resonate and lead in a marketplace driven by longevity. And I can't wait to talk about that in a second. But before In Transit, Karen built up her branding chops, holding senior roles at strategic brand agencies, including Interbrand and Landor in the US, Africa, and the Middle East. She helped brands of all sizes position themselves to connect with audiences. And she holds an MBA from INSEAD and a BA from Claremont McKenna College and is a longtime Los Angeles resident. So, anyway, welcome again. And so, I want to start off with understanding your journey. How did you come to focus on and champion not only age inclusive branding, but encouraging companies to build brands with longevity, that the brands can grow with their customers as they age?
I am of a certain age, so I am the target market. But one day I saw a consumer cellular commercial. I don't know if you're familiar with consumer
Yes.
cellular.
Yep.
And they target an over 55 demographic. And they do a wonderful job in what they're attempting to do. But when I saw that commercial, I realized that's going to be me in 2 years. And I don't look like that. I don't feel like that. That doesn't resonate with me. And they're lauded for doing a good job in focusing on a specific target market. But I realized that even though I was in that same age range,
Hmm.
potentially, a few years down the line, like that is not how I live. I didn't see me. So then
Okay.
I thought, like, what does this mean? What does this mean in terms of how I see myself? Do I not see myself as aging, or does over 50 mean so many different things to so many people? In that commercial, it was retirees having fun and almost being spoof like, where I'm not going to be a retiree. I wish I were a retiree.
Yeah.
I don't have grandkids. I had kids later in life, and it just didn't resonate. And it made me step back and try to think about, well, what's going on here? And
Hmm.
I looked more into the topic and realized, well, we don't live a three-stage life anymore. We
Yeah.
live a very broad patina of jobs and experiences. And so, really speaking to a specific demographic is harder than ever.
Yeah.
Because, as I say, I had kids later than in life. I have more in common right now with a 35-year-old than I do a 55-year-old, just by virtue of the age of my child, for example.
For example, right.
So it was really like that one commercial and then a series of other things. I was in a job where I was the oldest person. I was older than the founder and everyone was younger. And the intergenerational workforce concept wasn't really thought about. And it was an awkward situation, not in a bad way or a good way. Everyone was trying to feel like, how do you include someone straight out of college and someone with a tenured career in a very small firm? And it was that experience plus a confluence of factors and that one commercial that made me step back and think there's an opportunity here to rethink how we speak to demographics
Yep.
and how we speak to an older demographic, given that the population is aging overall.
Yeah. Yeah. As someone in that age range as well, I'm the same way. You see a lot of commercials and or you even look at magazine covers and things like that and you're like that's not me. I'm definitely still in my go-go years in my 50s and I'm not looking to retire anytime soon, same as what you were talking about. So how right, how do you get brands to actually understand that the life stages or the psychographics are different of the target market and over 50, right?
Exactly. And as I say, like if you put a bunch of toddlers in one room, the behaviors are generally the same, right?
Hmm.
20 somethings behaviors might be diverging a bit, but generally the same. But when you get to 50 plus, or like look at a 60-year-old, there are 60-year-olds who feel like 60 as in, 100 years ago and feel older. And there are 60-year-olds who are starting new companies.
Yeah,
And you could put, 10 60-year-olds in a room and their past could be dramatically different. And that's just what happens in this day and age.
yeah, yeah. So let me ask you, well, first of all, let me ask you, can you define, because I know in a lot of your writing and, on your website, your LinkedIn profile and things like this, you talk about this longevity economy. What is
Yes.
that? Can you define that for us?
Yeah, well, this is what's very interesting is that this idea of longevity, and you're going to hear a lot about age tech and, longevity economy, and all these words are coming out, right? Like
Yeah.
biohacking to live longer. And there's a phenomenon going on, but it's a very first world phenomenon.
Yeah.
So, like, I want to say this is a very US first world perspective because what's happening in the rest of the world is dramatically different.
Hmm.
But overall, we're living longer.
Yep.
We're living much healthier. So, again, a 60-year-old, and I can't cite the data, I'm not that smart, let's just be honest. But, a 60-year-old today will avoid debilitating disease much more effectively than a 6-year-old 75 years ago, right? So, we're
Right.
living longer and healthier, and we have more healthier middle years.
Yes.
So again, the middle years we're going to have a lot more of, and we're not going to decline as rapidly as maybe our ancestors did. So that's kind of thing number one going on. Thing
Okay.
number two going on is that fertility is dropping.
Yes.
So, like, if you think about Japan and what happened in Japan, fertility is dropping in the US. The birth weight is, like much lower than it has in the past. So now we
Yeah.
have this point where we're going to have fewer younger people and a lot more older people, and those older people are going to be healthier longer. And
Correct.
being an age of juvenescence, right, to coin a word which I did not create,
Yeah.
where we're going to act younger even though we're older.
Right.
So it's that where we talk about the longevity and economy and where brands have to rethink what it means to have customer lifetime value, right? So
Yes.
how do I stay with someone in those that increase in older years and be relevant and meaningful over that time? And
Right.
in addition, it doesn't mean that I'm excluding the younger years either. There are plenty of brands that have the ability to speak across generation. And so that's one issue and one like golden, that's what you really want to be. But even if you
Sure.
can't be that, can I have relevance across more of these middle years?
Got it. Got it. Okay. So tell me, what does it mean? And I'm going to get back to that idea about multi-generational relevance because I think it's more difficult to do. And I'll talk about
Yeah.
that in a minute. But let's talk about what does it mean to be an age inclusive brand? Is it just, is it just saying, gosh, I developed a product or a service and it's targeted towards this over 50 adult and they have these psychographics and these demographics and so I can really hone in on my messaging to target them. Is that what it means or is there something bigger than that?
Well, there are brands, and that the way I think about it is an age inclusive brand is something that targets, and this is almost branding 101 and going back to branding 101 principles, which we all know. Like we're targeting the psychographics. We're not
Right.
targeting the
The
demographics.
demographics.
So,
Right.
right. So now we want to talk about psychographics and mindset and life stage, right? So I think of an age inclusive brand that can speak to a mindset or a life stage that many demographics may participate
Fall into
into.
that. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly. So again, something like Aura is a great example. It's like anyone who really cares about emotional and physical balance, right? And I don't know that that's their brand statement. I've written on Aura before. I can't go back to what I wrote, but
Okay.
but it's this idea of like living healthy. Like that is a universal concept that could be shared by Gen Z to Gen X to boomers,
Right.
right?
Right.
But what's interesting is that the theme, they're targeting a general psychographic, but within that, they're looking at different life stages and demographics and serving different needs. So I
Okay.
could be monitoring my sleep. I could be using my Aura Ring for, again, like prenatal issues, whatever those might be. It might also track things that are more relevant to someone who's older. So the banner and the headline, it's like almost like a T-shaped approach. I have my psychographics or the broader life stage or need I'm speaking to, and underneath I can still have very specific offers that
Yep.
are targeted towards more discrete, either age related or more finite life stage issues.
Okay.
Right. And like Apple does it really well. And not to dive into age, like technology and wearable tech, but think about everyone wears an Apple Watch from younger to older, and that Apple Watch for me might have heart health measures. For
Yeah.
someone older than me, they may have fall detection. For someone younger than me, and you see all the, it's as simple as communicating with your friends or like basic like step count or measuring your run when you're doing the mile. So it's
Right.
really an interesting thing that's kind of ageless. And how do we get more brands to think, I'm going to target something that's higher order,
Mm-hmm.
but still serve the needs of each group within that?
Yeah. That's what I was going to ask you because it's the question I have to be able to target multi generations based on this lifestyle or psychographic or need or want or hierarchy of order. Does then the product or the service matter? Like, can only certain types of products, health style, or, like health foods or beauty products or food products, are those the only kinds of products that can cross multi generations? Or is it really any brand can do that as long as they open up their mind to, thinking about what is the strategy or what is the core belief, want, fear, aspiration that all of these people want. And that's what we're going to leverage when we talk about our brand and our messaging.
I think look, not every brand should or can be age inclusive, right? And so, especially when we think about certain brands that are, we do get to a point in life where we're more in a decline, right? And
Right?
like, and there are certain kind of older products that younger people don't want, and there are certain, I actually bought a pair of Hollister jeans, which is like firmly in the Gen Z because for some reason I tried on my daughter's jeans and I loved them, and
Yeah.
like I'm wearing Hollister, but that like, there's certain brands like that, like, you know what? I'm probably not going to shop there. Like there, and
Right.
there are certain
Right.
brands that don't need to be and should not be age inclusive. And we have to respect that. And even in the case of consumer cellular, they took a stance saying, like, no, we feel like the opportunity is in 55 plus. We're not going to try and be any broader, which
Yeah.
is fine for them. It's a
Right.
strategic choice. I think that by and large, most brands have the opportunity to have authentic conversations that can speak to values, mindset, and life stage on a more broad basis.
Hmm.
And I don't think that that's necessarily a challenging thing to do. We can do that. Most brands can do that if it strategically fits with the direction of the company.
Got it. Got it.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, because I was thinking, and this was an interesting, as we were coming up on this episode, I was kind of, doing a little bit of research on, what kind of brands are age inclusive and, things like that. And then it hit me something that I found interesting a number of years ago was the Skechers brand.
I know, exactly.
Because
Exactly.
Skechers was such a cool, hip youth shoe brand at a certain point. And then all of a sudden one day I was like, oh, I had said something to my daughter who was in her teens at the time about, oh, why don't you get these Skechers? They look really cute. And she's like, oh, absolutely not. That's a mom shoe now. And I was like,
Yeah,
oh my gosh, when did that happen? And, how did I miss that whole shift? But then I was reading up on it and it was like, okay, well, yeah, Skechers tried to expand their market to focus more on comfort.
yeah,
And by doing so, they targeted a different age group, really, and it says, however, it was good for them because it broadened their market. They started to
exactly.
appeal to a larger market, like you said, this middle group who's going to be lasting longer, living longer, buying more products longer, and it ended up being, some people kind of viewed it as, oh gosh, Skechers lost it. They lost the cool factor. They lost their target market, but actually they did very well by broadening their market and by
Exactly.
focusing on comfort, it appealed to a different age group and they owned it very nicely. Now they're trying to do some strategies and some ad campaigns and things trying to pull that youth, flavor back into it. I don't know if it'll work or not, but it's interesting because to me that's kind of a success story of yeah, we pivoted. We had a strong brand, but then we wanted to expand our market and we saw where there were more people and
Yeah.
what would be appealing to them, and they did a very nice job of doing that.
Yeah, and that's a point where it's actually part. I mean, that's I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's Decker Brands, right?
I think so,
So
yeah.
so they have a whole stable of brands. So if you stand back and look at the whole portfolio, this might be a broader portfolio strategy,
Hmm.
but the idea is correct, right? They are in terms of what they were aiming for. They were aiming for that larger middle market, and they still have the kid shoe side
Yeah,
area, right? So if you
right,
look at who's actually entering the store it's someone slightly younger than me who might have stability needs, but also might be buying for the kids, but like children, but they've missed, but you're right, they're no longer cool for that teen area.
right.
And I think this is what is also important to understand is that you you can still be age inclusive but not have to yell for a certain demographic. So remember,
Yes.
Skechers had all those commercials with people bending over the slip-on shoes,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And and they dove down into that image of like someone slightly older. And I think at one point they might have had Martha Stewart or Snoop, I don't know
Yeah, they
who,
did have Martha Stewart. Yes.
Stewart. My daughter's not going to resonate with Martha Stewart, but you could have had the same commercial running on TikTok or a vignette on TikTok of someone younger doing the same thing and the same action and maybe not dilute that energy so much. But there are plenty of brands, and I did a shout out the other day to Adidas, which the marketing and the branding is still very young, right?
Yeah.
Or very, but the product itself is very age inclusive. And so when you think about building an age inclusive brand, there's many levers that you can use,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Now, there's age inclusive corporations, and that's when, I hire and I, do my processes. There's age inclusive product design, which is I create products that target a broader demographic, and they talk about universal design codes.
Yes.
Like if I design for everyone, I can, I still have a very viable product. Like
Right.
OXO does that. It's universal design, but anyone can use it.
Yep.
Then there's age inclusive branding and communications. And you can be as effective with age inclusive design and subtly message the communications as opposed to dive down on the communications and ignore the design or whatnot. So it
Right.
also depends on what lever you're using
Okay.
to do that.
Yeah.
So, and I highlight Adidas because half of their shoes are fit for everyone. And they offer the stability and the comfort, and Nike as well. Nike, like they have the stability shoes. If you think about Hoka, they have stability shoes,
Right.
but they're not showing necessarily an older demographic. They're showing a mix. They're
Right.
choosing the channels for which to communicate and how they're communicating, their brand message, but sometimes it might be younger, more fun content. Sometimes it might be slightly different content. And it's really understanding how am I going to use all these levers to communicate my brand?
Right.
And do I have the right mix so that I can have the right product, but also message in the right way to where my different audiences might be?
Yeah. So what do you think? So let's talk about what do you think, and I guess it depends on the company, it depends on the product, but what would be a better strategy to be age inclusive? Would it be like let's take an example of let's say Dove soap
Yes.
products. So
Yeah.
in the ad, you see so much diversity and inclusion of who's using
Exactly.
the product because really, like you said, soap, anyone can use the soap. Now they target women, they have a men's line, but most of
Yeah.
their ads are women but there's all generations in that one ad. Versus,
Yes.
like you said, maybe Skechers, would do, the same ad that Martha Stewart was in, or that, like you said, it's an older adult putting the comfort shoes on they can slip on, and then also showing kids do it. Is it better to have the same core message, but like you said, execute it in different ways to different generations, or to have one ad that just says we are multi-generational?
I think the thing is, like, we are in the age of content,
Hmm.
right? And like, content is king. And so I'm going to push back on the idea of an ad because an ad to me is something like that doesn't go in depth.
Yeah.
But I think that, and I am going to answer that. I think that the point of view is that you need to have content that can resonate
Yeah.
across generations. And so now I'm going to pick up on Jones Road. Are you familiar with Jones Road?
The
The
makeup
makeup.
company? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Hmm.
Okay. And like we could wax and wane over Jones Road because there's so much learning from that brand.
Okay.
But, you know, I can sit here and tell you it is multi-generational and it is generally multi-generational. It tends to skew older because we all have a love, who are those of us who are for Bobby Brown, who is the founder of Jones Road. Okay.
Okay.
What's beautiful about Jones Road is that on the same website, she's able to talk about makeup for mother of the bride,
Mm.
i.e., someone in my age range. Even though I have
Right.
a 13-year-old, we've already figured out that I'm confused,
Right.
as well as prom makeup,
Right.
how to apply prom makeup. And it's the content that resonates
Okay.
more so than anything else. And then you see these beautiful pictures of mother and daughter. Now, that is the content is extremely age inclusive.
Yes.
On the website, if you went to their website or even Instagram, do they look 55? No. It is a patina of colors and ages and sizes, and it's very age inclusive and everything inclusive. It feels like because it's a beauty brand, and I always say this about beauty brands, like even if it's an older person, they're a lot more glamorous than the rest of us.
Mm.
But they have a mix that represents the population they're trying to attract.
Okay.
So I think that the first thing is your content, can you create content that is relevant across ages and stages? And if you can be an age inclusive brand. And
Yes.
then if you can be an age inclusive brand, you need to show people authentically. your
Yes.
target market authentically. And that might be a combined ad or it might be vignettes, but there's an opportunity to show everyone in the right place, in the right forum.
Right.
Another brand that's great is Loewe, not Low Loewe, which is the Spanish Loewe. You want to say
Okay.
low, but it's
Okay.
actually Loewe. It's the Spanish luxury brand. And they've gone away from the hot young models to more of an eclectic mix, but and it shows everyone from Maggie Smith to young actors I don't know. They have a very broad range. But
Okay.
what's interesting is that the beauty part about the brand is the content on TikTok is humorous and engaging and about the craft that they create. They tell great stories and it's almost comedic about how they talk about creating the perfect bag. And the content is so engaging. And even though it's essentially a fashion slash beauty brand, the content is about the value and the craftsmanship and the humor of humanity. And that content is truly age inclusive.
Age
It's not
inclusive.
about what you
Right.
look like or what you feel like, it's about values and perspective. And I think it's really thinking about, well, what does my brand stand for? How can I speak to these different life stages? And what are the values that encompass that? And then designing around that.
And then designing around that. Okay. No, that's excellent. So you work with a lot of companies, helping them to, to take their brand and expand it potentially to be more age inclusive. Do you have a specific process or specific steps? Like you've mentioned a bunch of things now about, look at this and then, craft your messaging. But is there something that you would share with other companies who are maybe saying, should I do this? Should I not do this? And then how do I start?
I think it goes back to really, first it is, what is your strategy? And I have to say, my background is like back in the
Yeah.
day being very long ago, is, corporate brand strategy. What is a foundational business strategy?
Right.
Right. And what is it you're creating? And do you have an opportunity? And then layer on the fact that, I wouldn't even say start with the consumer. I would say start with the facts. And the facts are that do you have a strategy for the fact that we are an aging economy?
Yeah.
And have you taken to that account? How you taken into the long game? So this is
Right.
outside the area of performance marketing. This is outside the area of quarterly performing. If I could sit down with a group of C-suite executives and say, you know, in 5 years, the Gen X consumer are going to be the we will be at our peak earning
Yes.
potential.
Yep.
And can you capture that in 5 years? And then in 10 years, are you ready to attack an aging economy? Are you sufficiently diversified that either you're able to capture the future value of older consumers, given that we're aging,
Yeah.
or is your strategy so strong in like very specific demographics, if these might be younger, that you know that you can weather an aging economy? And start there and have a very kind of clear point of view if age inclusivity is even relevant. And if it
Okay.
is, then you really need to talk about, well, how do our products and services fit that need? And how can we design around the future consumer? And that is where you always start with the customer and the consumer insight. And what does it look like to live, you know, to be a 50-year-old today? And this is also where you can go back to say, well, who's actually designing your products and services? Is it a 22-year-old designing
Yeah.
for a 50-year-old? Is
Right.
it, like what does that actually look like? So I think it's first, what is the business strategy? And are we ready for the next 3, 5, 10 years? 10 being extreme, I know, but
Yeah.
are we ready for the next 5 years? Can we sustain growth or do we need to pivot towards age inclusivity? And if we do, how do we really design around the customer? And do I have the right people and the right product to do that? Because, and I think this is a stereotype of the 50 plus consumer, like we're loyal, we don't change, we're value conscious. That's not exactly true.
Okay.
What is true is that we've worked hard for our money
Yep.
and we're not going to follow flashy trends. And
Hmm.
what's true is that because we worked hard for our money, we need products that really deliver on our lifestyle. And so, if you're able then to rethink, well, what am I actually giving people to be age inclusive and it can fit a lifestyle of a 50 plus person in this situation and whatnot, you really need to think about, well, what are we actually delivering to them? And
Right.
then the communications follow after that.
Right. Okay. Now let me ask you too, also, because a lot of what we've been talking about, and a lot of the examples we've been talking about are all consumer brands.
Yes. It's
So does this play in B2B, business to business? I know some consultants who work a lot with businesses talking, they're more involved in like the HR and how do we help you coach through multi-generational workforce issues and, communication styles and things like that. But are there other examples or companies maybe that you've worked with that are B2B but have jumped on this idea about age inclusive branding?
I think that's a great question. And I think it's not so much age inclusive branding, but well, I'm going to bifurcate this. There
Yeah.
are B2B issues, and it's more B2B to C. Like, what does the future of financial services look like? What does the future of the insurance industry look like? What is, the future of a lot of these things in terms of people living to 100 and 150 years? And there are structural issues on like the healthcare and insurance side. And what are we offering to brokers or to, insurance intermediaries that can help them talk the language so that they can attract more customers, right? So in the future, we're going to see a lot more about annuities that you can, they're not, when you think of annuity, you think of the end of your life, right? Where I need a regular payment. We're going to need annuities earlier in our lifetime because we may take a break from work and then go back to school and we need recurring income. And then we might go back to work when we're 70. So there's going to be a whole area of innovation, which will require branding, which will be on creating products and services that ultimately will be B2C, but we need to sell through intermediaries or change an industry around. So I would say yes, on a very broad level, there is an opportunity to rethink what we create and what we design and how we communicate and brand that overall. And then there's the future of the corporate brand. So again, this is more B to employee, but the fact of the matter is, if we don't have enough young people out there,
Yeah.
we need a lot more older people in work, right? Like we need to
Absolutely.
support ourselves. And our tax base is shrinking. If
Yes.
you think about it that way, literally the tax base is shrinking. There are
Right.
going to be fewer children to support adults. And we talk about the great wealth transfer. That's not everyone.
No, it's
Let's just be
absolutely not
clear.
everyone. Right.
That's not everyone. And
Right.
so then I would say, and I'm kind of avoiding the B2B question, but I think that there's a future for corporate brands as employer brands to really step up the place
Yes.
and rethink about how we speak to potential employees, people re-entering, what does flexibility in the workforce look like? I'm a solopreneur right now or an entrepreneur. I mean, I
Yeah.
work with a network of people that help me deliver
Right.
my products and services. I could imagine a future where I went back to being employed, but it would never look like what I was employed in before.
Right. Absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
about autonomy and flexibility and a new brand of working. And employers aren't there yet. They
No.
just aren't. And then, there are statistics, again, I'll quote them wrong because I don't have a photographic memory, but, the majority of recruiters say that experienced candidates perform better than younger ones at the beginning of a job. But, fewer than 13% will actually look at or hire older candidates. So, yes, we believe that they're great, but no, we don't want to hire them, right? So,
Right.
we need to change that equation.
Right. No, you're right. And that's a whole nother subject for a whole
Yeah, no.
another podcast is this whole idea of, yeah, I have a lot of people I know who are in their 60s and still want to keep working and cannot find anyone to hire them. Uh,
Yeah.
and then now you read every article about how no one under 25 is being hired at all because AI has replaced all of these entry level jobs. It's like, and then how are these middle managers going to be replaced when you have not hired anyone underneath to mentor and bring up to that skill set? So, again, I love the idea about employer branding because I work with a lot of small firms on employer branding just to get noticed, just to attract talent, to say, hey, we've got a unique, we've got a unique culture here, we've got unique career options for you. But I like what you're talking about with bigger companies who maybe are not fighting that we've never heard of you, why would we work for you? They're fighting a different issue, which is, like you said, how do you brand yourself as a place to work that ticks the buttons of today's new workforce and what they want with flexibility and career paths and things like that. So yeah, I love this discussion. This has been really fascinating in terms of, again, being someone in the age group
Yeah, I know.
who, who needs to be, hey, pay attention to me, create products and brands for me. I love that. But I think there's just so much interesting information about how it's strategically relevant to change your focus, right? To start thinking wider and, like customer lifetime value you were talking about. Maybe it was 5 years was a typical customer lifetime
Yeah,
value at a certain point. Now it might be 15 or 20. And
exactly.
but it doesn't mean that person, even though they're still in that same middle market, that person is not stuck. So even over the 20-year period of time that they're considered this middle market, they may be experiencing changes in their lifestyle, in their, in their families, in their careers, in what they want out of life. And how do you, as a brand marketer, make sure that your brand stays relevant? So
Yeah.
I find that
And,
fascinating. Yeah.
and it's interesting because, we're asking people the immediate need is designing for, and I think I spoke about this earlier with you when we first met, but,
Uh-huh.
the immediate need is to design for, the sandwich generation 50, 55 plus, right?
Right. Right.
Because they hold the wealth. They're the decision maker for their parents and for their kids,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So there's just a financial powerhouse that you need to appeal to, right? So like
Yes.
that's the immediate need in, from now until the next 5 years. But then, in addition to, I also need to think about my brand for the 100-year life, right? And what does that look like? So there are almost two aspects to this like age inclusivity. One is how do I get to the sweet spot as quickly as possible without alienating people? So being age inclusive. And then how do I rethink my products and services for that lifetime customer value that when we're all going to live to 150?
Absolutely. So this has been fascinating. Thank you
Good.
so much. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope everyone else has as well. But what I like to ask every guest at the end of the show is, can you help me honor a small or mid-sized business that is just really killing it with their brand? And maybe it's someone that you've noticed who's doing a great job targeting multiple generations. But would you be able to give a shout out to an organization that you think is just really doing a fantastic job with their branding?
Do I have to leave it to one?
Oh, you can have as many as you want. Go
Okay,
ahead.
there are two. One is Shredley, so it's a mountain biking apparel brand, but they, again, this really was the brand that they design for all ages and stages and comfort needs of anyone who wants to mountain bike, right? The reason why I think it's beautiful is one, the product was designed around someone who is active and could be a range of age, but really was the right form factor. So it goes back to almost like the Nike shoe where I have stability shoes, but I don't say I'm old. This is the same thing. It's primarily for women, but the products themselves support, different needs. And like, I might need more pockets. Might need pockets in different places. So it's a range of styles that kind of fits everybody. And what's beautiful is that when you look at the actual content, it's very it's not young. It's almost ageless. There are people just enjoying themselves as every age and stage and celebrating the joy and the freedom of mountain biking. And that's the ethos you want to capture, right? It's the joy and the freedom. It's not
Right.
the age. So it
Right.
doesn't matter what age these people are. So that's one. And the other one I love only because it started like, a lot of these brands fall into this like, oh, all of a sudden we're like age inclusive and intergenerational. It's like whatever. A lot of beauty brands, like all of a sudden you see Isabella Rossellini. And I'm not like dissing that, but you
Right.
weren't created from that point of view. And there's this other beauty brand from Canada, and I'm waiting to see it on the shelves of Sephora. I haven't seen it yet. It's 1999, and the name is from 19-year-olds to 99-year-olds. And it's the
Okay.
same ethos, right? It's like this is for everyone. The beauty is it was created for everyone at day one. And I'd love to see that kind of take off.
Excellent. Oh, I'm going to go check both of those out because they sound very intriguing. But let's go ahead and wrap this up. This has been fascinating. So, Karen, thank you for spending so much time with me today and sharing your insights. But after listening to this podcast, if companies want to reach out to you for help rethinking their brand approach for age inclusivity or how they tackle the longevity economy, how can they reach you?
They can, I'm on LinkedIn under Intransit-co. So www.intransit-co.com, or you can look up Intransit or Intransit strategy and I should pop up. But I'd love to hear anyone's story, even if you're a brand that you feel like you're age inclusive. I just want to hear your story.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Karen. I'm so thrilled that you spent time with me today.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thank all of you for listening to this episode of the Turbo Branding Show. I hope you've been inspired to ignite your growth by leveraging your brand. And if you enjoyed it, I'd love it if you could help me build a strong brand following for this show. So please share this episode and be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review. Thank you, and stay tuned for our next episode.